Hello, I'm Bill Alexander, CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's program, Women's History Month, Advancing Representation in Law Enforcement, which was created in partnership with the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives and generously sponsored by Target. In 1974, the National Policing Institute published a pivotal report titled Women in Policing, a Manual, which continues to resonate today. Over the past 50 years, extensive research has demonstrated the significant positive impact that women officers have on the field of law enforcement. Despite this, women still comprise only 12% of the overall police force in the United States. Today, our panel is going to discuss the findings from these studies and explore the importance of the recruitment and retention of women in law enforcement agencies. Additionally, the panel discussion will also explore the progress of the 30 by 30 initiative, which aims to increase the representation of women in policing. Before we hear from our panel, we will have some brief opening remarks from tonight's sponsor, Target. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy tonight's program.
Hi, I'm Ashley Leonard, Senior Director, Assets Protection at Target. As a woman in leadership, I recognize the contributions of women throughout history who broke barriers and paved the path for today. That includes those in law enforcement. At Target, those contributions at the very root of our success. And our women leaders, team members, partners, and suppliers drive the ideas and experiences from the products on our shelves to the work behind the scenes that make the bullseye go round. While the work continues, we are proud to be all in creating a workplace where all team members feel empowered to grow, get inspired, and lead meaningful careers. On behalf of Target, I would like to thank law enforcement partners for your commitment to leadership, public service, and for helping Target keep our guests, team members, and communities safe. Thank you.
So, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I am Gina V. Hawkins, and I am the National President for the National Association of Law Enforcement Executives, NALE. I am super excited about being able to moderate this Women History Month panel. I'm very excited to introduce them, to ask a lot of questions that we are very interested in knowing and truly celebrating Women History Month for this year. So as I said, I'm the president of the National Association of Law Enforcement Women Executives, and NALE has been in existence for a little over 25 years. We lead, mentor, and inspire women across the nation. Please go to our website, nale.org, to find even more information. I want to share a little bit more about NALE, but right now I want to get into our panel because we have a little limited amount of time. But we have a lot of questions and a lot of history that we want to know about these amazing organizations and women that lead this organization. I'm first going to start by introducing Tanya Meisenholder. She's the Executive Director of 30 by 30 Initiative.
I'm really happy to be here today and celebrate Women's History Month with everyone. I'm Tanya Meisenholder. I currently oversee the 30 by 30 Initiative to advance and support women in policing.
Thank you, Tanya. Next on our panel list is going to be Katrina Bonus. She's the president of WIFL. I'm allowed Katrina to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am honored to be here with such strong and amazing women as part of this panel. I am Katrina Bonus, retired federal law enforcement myself, and currently the president of Women in Federal Law Enforcement, WIFL. Similar to NALE, we advocate and support all the amazing women in the federal law enforcement profession, provide mentorship, networking, scholarships, awards, and really just being a support system and recognizing the strong work that women do in our amazing profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. And last but not least, Jen Rainier.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here with you all celebrating this wonderful month and occasion. My name is Jen Rainier. I'm the director of the Workforce Wellbeing and Effectiveness Program within RTI International's Center for Public Safety and Resilience. So I work with multidisciplinary researchers and applied practitioners to improve policing and other areas of the criminal legal system, and just really happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you. So I kind of wanted to do that a little bit. So let me explain what I did. First of all, All of these panel members are amazing women. They have been in this profession for decades. Us combined totally have done a lot of work advocating, not just for our profession, but truly advocating for women in our profession. And so often when we have the opportunity to tell a little bit about our history and what we do, we minimize that. And that's a topic we're going to discuss. We minimize that because, one, we know that we are advocating for our future and advocating for others. But please, as you watch this webinar and as you watch the panel discuss, take the time to Google each one of these ladies on the panel. They are, as I call it, big freaking deals. So not only are they the professionals in this and leading these organizations, but they have a lot of history. So it's going to be validated why they're here on this panel answering these questions. So without further ado, let's get into the session. So I'm going to start with Katrina Bonus. And Katrina, the first question that I have for you, who were your trailblazing women who inspired you, and how did they influence your career?
Thank you for the question, Gina. And one, I just want to recognize you, another incredible woman who has been in the professional space, leading multiple organizations at the senior rank. So I just want to, while you're recognizing Tanya, Jen, and I myself, I just want to recognize you as well. So for me, the trailblazing woman is going to take it in a personal level. My mom. My mom is one of the first women to join the Metropolitan Police Department, the DC Police, back in the early 1970s. And she transitioned as a secretary. And when doors opened for women to actually join the profession outside of administrative positions, but in true what we know law enforcement positions as sworn gun carriers, my mom was tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to actually go into the academy and the training. So she spent 22 years with Metropolitan Police, even for me, the young age, and in 5th and 6th grade when I was a safety patrol officer, kind of guiding and watching her career, the challenges that she went through, the successes that she also had, and her accomplishments really just set the tone of public service, again, community service, and just the impact in a law enforcement profession. So watching her and her great career, but more importantly, as I knew I wanted to join law enforcement at some point when I grew up, really just set the tone of how I was going to endure in a profession that can have meaningful impact, not just within and all of the other agencies that we work with, but more importantly, in the communities that we serve. And I'll have to say, just while I watched her throughout her career, back then at 5th and 6th grade, it looked easy. But until you're actually in it, going through a police academy, going through promotional processes, going through, the ebbs and flows of balancing work and professional and personal life, you recognize that it's not easy. So in my role here with Wiffle, just really being able to use what I learned from her and her career, what I learned throughout my own 27-year career, and really just being able to set the profession to be even better for the newer and next generation.
What a blessing, first of all, to have your mother, right, setting the tone. And then the lessons that you learn from that so often people take for granted. She took the opportunity to do extra, to do more that others at the time never did. And then you think about what year did she go through this process? We think we have it hard. Imagine how hard she was by herself. So that was amazing. Tanya, on to you. Prior to you joining 30 by 30, you have spent over 20 years, maybe close to 20 years, as a professional staff leader at NYPD. Can you describe your experience, how your experience aligns with understanding of sworn officers and the challenges that may come about with that?
Thanks for that question, Gina. Being a civilian professional staff member in law enforcement can be complicated, to say the least. And most of my career was spent at the NYPD, but I worked in a couple of upstate New York agencies as well. And then Katrina, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I started as an intern with the ATF back in the mid 90s, but I'm not going to date myself any more than that. I'm I'm very curious by nature, so I have taken so many opportunities to really try and learn what it's like to be an officer and what it's like to be a female in the profession, and think about the challenges that folks face on a day-to-day basis. And we all know that policing is a really difficult job, but it doesn't have to be, more difficult for some people that are in it. And I'm also married to a police officer, so that, it impacts me every day. So really thinking about the challenges and how they are and aren't different for professional staff. Some of them are the same as a female. When you're talking about work-life balance, you're talking about male-dominated profession, sexual harassment, and others are different. They are, a lot of civilians have challenges with what their rank structure looks like. They sometimes are not always on the same page as their sworn counterparts. So I really think I've had the benefit of learning and being in both worlds. And I've been asked this more than once. Was it more difficult for you in your career being a woman or a professional staff member? And my answer is, it depends on the day. There's challenges for both. I'm really glad to see that there's been more emphasis on professional staff in the past couple of years, because I think improving the workplace for everyone, sworn, civilian, no matter gender, race, any of those things, is what we really need to focus on if we're going to continue to improve law enforcement as a profession.
Thank you, Tanya. That definitely, although we have, as you mentioned, although we have a documented when women got into law enforcement, right, or history, think about along the ways, professional staff existed, right? Even Katrina talked about her mom. She existed supporting law enforcement or the profession. We've always been there, but also now the transition of our profession, understanding the roles of executive decision-making, can have a non-sworn capacity and still impact our profession. So thank you for that, sharing on how it impacts you. So Jen, what brought you into this work? Tell me, how did you become interested in conducting research on women in policing?
Thanks for the question. So I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist by training, which means that I study workplace and workforce issues. And the reason that I got into that is, I've always wanted to help people in some way and just improve people's experience of their lives. And, one of those people who just wants to leave the world a little bit better than I found it, right? And work impacts people so much in any profession, right? Whether it's like the tangible economic benefits of the salary and the insurance and all of those things that you need to have a healthy and stable life, but also just your ability to feel like you're doing something meaningful, your experience of what your day is like, no matter what people do for work, it has a huge impact on just their lives overall and their quality of life. And when I learned that industrial and organizational psychology was a thing, I was just like, okay, this is fascinating. You can help organizations to understand, some changes that they can make to really make those experiences better for people. And then in return, have people be more engaged and do higher quality work and in police work, better serve communities, right? So I had some really formative experiences in my earlier research career before I came to RTI, where I am now. I worked at Catalyst, which is a nonprofit that does research and consulting on understanding opportunities for women in business. And then I also worked at the Center for Parental Leave Leadership, which helps organizations understand their data to see how leave practices and policies are affecting their workforce, how they can better support people, and the opportunities there are to really capitalize on, these transitions in people's lives, right? So if you support employees better through these periods of transition, then they're more likely to stay with the organization, which saves the organization money. And there are all sorts of, really great outcomes that come from understanding the impact of your policies and practices. When it comes to policing, so when I started working at RTI, I got connected with a fantastic group of researchers in our policing research program. So they have a background that's different from me in, criminology and policing research, who are interested in studying occupational stress among police officers. So they, knew pretty much everything there is to know from a research perspective on policing, but didn't have that specific workforce expertise in terms of how you study and evaluate workforce issues and policies and practices. So it became this fantastic partnership where we realized there were a lot of things that we could tackle together. And over time, we realized, this was right around the time that 30 by 30, was establishing itself. And, we had some relationships with Nolly that we've, further developed along the way, and just realized there's a lot of potential here. Obviously, you women have known that for decades, right? The potential of women in law enforcement. But at that point, not a lot of people were studying it in terms of like large scale empirical studies. There wasn't a lot of data there. I know that's some of what you all were discussing, 5-10 years ago when you were thinking about what comes next. It was like, we need more research to really understand how to support women in the workforce, understand how women and everyone just performs in police work. So it just seemed to me like this is a culmination of everything I've been wanting to do. I have always wanted to make the world a better place. And I feel like supporting the police force is one of the best ways I can possibly think of to do that, in terms of the critical role that police play in society and how it impacts communities. And it allowed me to bring my, unique skill set of workplace and workforce research into this space. So I'm really thankful to have landed here. It's been fascinating and super meaningful, and grateful to be here with you all.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you for your passion. As you said, it was your why, and it was a passion to make a difference, right? How can we make an impact? And we thank you, because I promise you, when I first started, never was I trying to collect the evidence or collect the data or do the research. So it is very important that we be able to tell the story with true, tangible research and to make a difference for the future. So thank you very much. So now let's get into a little bit more of a history component. Katrina, I'm gonna come to you on this one. So Katrina, looking back at the last 50 years, what are some of the significant milestones for women in federal law enforcement? Because, I come from local, so I can only imagine what you had gone through. But women in federal law enforcement have worked tirelessly to earn their place in this profession. How can we continue to honor their legacy pushing forward? So sorry, Katrina, it's a two-part question. First, tell me a little bit about the significant roles, the milestones for women in federal law enforcement, and then how can we continue to honor their legacy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As we've gone through the last 50 years, as you shared your history with Nolly, WIFL has also too been around for at least 25 years, if not even before. I think over the last 50 years, it's been inspiring and encouraging of what the laws and what people have said women are allowed to do, and really just being able to transfer it to what women deserve to do, and really just being able to open doors and open opportunities. What really sets the message for me is, back before 1970s, when laws changed, was a young girl who had a dream to be in the FBI, and she wrote J. Edgar Hoover a letter just talking about her dreams, and once she becomes of age, she's going to put in for the job. And he responded to her letter. And, his response really was, because of the nature of the duties of our special agents are called upon to perform, we do not employ women in this position. We must have agents who are qualified to cope with any situation they may face. And you just think of how heartbreaking it was, for a 16-year-old girl who, just her dream was to be an FBI agent, when obviously disappointed when she received the response back. But as women do, we're resilient, and we just, obviously jump over that obstacle. We go around that obstacle, and instead of the FBI, her new dream was to become DEA, and that's what she aspired, and that's what she became, a DEA agent. So really just being able to just open doors and open opportunities. And then the next director actually had the courage, and as laws changed, really be able to allow for, again, opening doors for what women are deserving to be able to, join the profession, and recognizing the good work that they're going to do. As we talk about the last 50 years, we started talking about going from administrative positions to gun carrier positions where they can effect arrest and execute warrants and carry weapons. I look at the story of Margie Moore, one of the founders of WIFL, who started her career with NYPD. Tanya, kind of where you came from. She was wearing skirts, while she was working, and was going upstairs in New York City, going up the steps of apartment buildings, and right below her were her male counterparts, and so her courage was the next day she wore pants to work. She went out and bought some tactical pants. She showed up to work, and while she was questioned by her leadership, she said, absolutely not, this is unacceptable. So really just from those type of successes, and really just being able to challenge the mindset and challenge the perspective, and really just challenge the why do we do these things, just using those opportunities. And we've continued throughout the profession, whether it's women on tactical units, K9, SWAT, counter sniper, emergency response team, just really being able to just open doors, and, but also to being the support system for women and for those first, because we can all say it really is lonely, especially as you strive and get to those top positions. And again, milestones of women leading agencies, whether it was Julie Pearson for the Secret Service, Regina Lombardo, acting director of ATF, and really just being a support system to just really wrap around, because again, when you're the only woman walking into a room, I was one of those as the first female deputy chief of our 100-year history of the uniform division of the Secret Service. It can be lonely, but again, when you have a support system of male mentors as well as female mentors, it just makes it that much easier.
Great. So just listening to the letter response, right, is not laughable, but it's sad. We handle so much, even before this recording, sharing with you all how much decision-making crisis that we have to do all the time, while we are either managing illness, families, and still getting the work done, and tactical, operational, and even personal. So thank you for that, Katrina. Next, Tanya. What is the history of Women's History Month? We're all excited about it. I'm super excited, one, because I'm a super cheerleader, but I'm a cheerleader for us in this profession. But tell me about, what is the history of Women's History Month?
Thanks, Gina. So Women's History Month actually dates back to March 8th, 1911, which is International Women's Day. That was recognized globally as a day to advocate for women's rights. In the US, it started a bit slower. So it actually started with a Women's History Week in 1978, when the Education Task Force in California organized the first Women's History Week and chose the week of March 8th to align with International Women's Day. That idea gained traction, and in 1980, President Jimmy Carter issued the first presidential proclamation declaring the week of March 8th as National Women's History Week. So that same year, Congress then formally recognized Women's History Week across the country. And it's important to mention that when we talk about Women's History Week, as much as we celebrate women in law enforcement, it's really women all over that we're celebrating. After that, the movement continued to grow, and the National Women's History Project, which is now referred to as the National Women's History Alliance, petitioned Congress to officially designate March as Women's History Month. And since then, all of our U.S. presidents have issued annual proclamations recognizing March as Women's History Month. And that is really important to celebrate the achievements and the contributions of women in American history. One thing I would add is, this month is really important because it serves as an opportunity to acknowledge what is often overlooked contributions of women in a number of fields. I mentioned, going beyond law enforcement. If you think about science and tech, if you think about politics, the arts, all of these different ways, it gives us an opportunity to reflect on women's progress more broadly and acknowledge what those challenges have been for women, and also to continue to strive for advancing and supporting women across the nation and internationally as well.
Thank you, Tanya, for that. I have the benefit of having a lot of history people that I've come across and actually worked for. So it's a blessing to have that. But I also reflect on the many women in this profession across our nation that don't know not just the history, but don't know their rights and don't know how they can get support. So I think that's why it's very important for us to share resources as much as possible for women in this profession, but also to get examples, right? To get examples of a story that I just heard from literally this week. My first vice president, Julie Rodriguez, said she was at a conference and there was a lady, an officer who was 8 months pregnant, still in uniform, did not know her rights and still was patrolling. So small things like that. So with that, Jen, tell us, what kinds of studies do you conduct on policing in the policing workforce? Because we need to say, collect information, but what kind of data do you collect? And what will it tell you? What does the police research data say about the needs, experience, and performance of women in policing? Because although we have stories like I just shared, we are going to need the data. So I guess that's the question. What do you collect to be able to help tell these stories?
Thank you for the question. I love it because admittedly, I am a research nerd, which is why I landed here. So we are conducting workforce studies on topics that I think are of critical importance to the field, including, well, and this is just in the workforce space. Obviously, there's lots of different, topics of research in policing research. We're looking at recruiting, hiring, retention, career pathways, how people enter the profession, how to make those pathways more accessible, both into and through the career. We're looking at issues of work-related stress and health, workload, leadership and supervision. And so this can look a lot of different ways. Some of these studies, we're really trying to understand what are the experiences of current law enforcement, women in law enforcement, and, everyone in law enforcement. In others, we really need to access the general population because we know, like with the staffing shortages that we've had all this time, we have to turn to a broader audience than policing has drawn in the past. So we've done some studies with the general population where we've surveyed people who are at all stages of their career and might be looking for a career pivot, with college students either who are studying criminal justice or at least sort of interested in the field, or in other majors that are relevant to policing, to understand what do you look for in a career? What are your thoughts on law enforcement as a profession? Understanding what they learn, or what they've learned and what they believe and think about the profession, what would get them more interested. And in terms of the data that we look at every possible source. This is one of the parts of my job that I think is the most fun, because we work with people who have different expertise and can help us look at these things from different angles. So, sometimes we do surveys and focus groups to ask people specific questions about, these certain topics of interest. But we also look at some different data sources as well. We have a study that we're doing in partnership with 30 by 30, where we're looking at exit interview data, which almost every agency collects, but very few look at systematically because of bandwidth and other reasons, right? And we're finding a wealth of information about the reason, people think, oh, that's just a check the box activity, you're not going to learn much. But we found in like 12 agencies that we've looked at that vary in size and region of the country, there's a ton of information there, not only about the things that led people to leave the profession, both women and men, but about specific recommendations that they have for their agencies to improve, thoughts that they have on what they loved about their job, right? Things that the agencies can help people experience more of. We also look at administrative data sometimes. So some of what we're looking at for a retention study in particular is what are the patterns of when people are leaving? What are the characteristics of the positions that they're in, of the individuals? So to help agencies better plan and see, okay, these parts of the organization might be at risk. Can we look at more into, what's going on over there, why that might be, identify solutions for mitigating it. We're also looking at right now for that same study, social media data. So obviously you will hear different things from people that they'll tell you, in a survey or an interview than what people will say anonymously online. So we are working with our friends in data science to analyze these huge amounts of data and sift through a lot of irrelevant information to get to some really relevant information that law enforcement are posting online about their experiences of work in terms of what they love and what they hate about their jobs, what is causing them a lot of stress, why they make career moves. So it's really exciting, I think, where we are in policing research today, because especially with AI, there are challenges with that, but it's allowing us to analyze data in ways that we, never really could before, or that used to take a really long time. We can now do a lot quicker. I think one other thing I want to mention about the research is just the importance of partnerships. So how we do the research is equally as important to who we do it with. So, at RTI and organizations like us, the research is only successful if we do it in partnership with organizations like yours, right? So you all know what questions need to be answered on the ground. You know how we can present the results in a way that's actually going to be meaningful and actionable. So, we'll publish something in an academic journal, when we try to make it open access, but even I don't really like reading those articles, I will admit, right? They're lengthy, they're hard to understand. So how can we do more webinars like this? How can we create how-to guides in partnership with you all so that the research is actually meaningful? In terms of what the data says, I could talk about this for hours, but I think one of the most important things I want to share is that often what women experience and want and need is not as different in terms of what they want from the work environment as what anyone else wants, right? So I think there's been this perception that, okay, if you're creating a work environment for women, you're doing something that's disadvantaging other people, or it's only relevant for a small proportion of folks. And we're not hearing that at all, right? When we looked at what kinds of messaging and communications draw people into the field, very similar for women and men. Same for why people are leaving, right? And what people want in a job. And I think it's interesting too, like one of the things I love about research is dispelling myths. We see this across generations too. People talk a lot about generational differences, and there are some, but for the most part, people and police officers want similar things. They want supportive work environments. They want a supportive culture. They want the ability to manage work and non-work life. I think people put up with really difficult work environments for a long time because they had to, right? It was a very macho, rigid culture, and people dealt with that because they wanted to be in the job for various reasons. But I think people of all types today are saying, like, we want a better ability to have a healthier life and to be able to sustain, a healthy and successful career over the lifespan. So that's one of the things that I love about studying women in policing is sometimes I think women are more willing to talk about some of these issues, but when we actually look at the data from what women and men want, it tends to be more similar than people would think. I guess the one caveat of that, though, is just in terms of some of the challenges that women face. I have been a bit surprised at just some of the basic challenges that women still face in terms of uniforms that don't fit their body or equipment, that's not appropriate for their body. And I know in recent years, one of the things that your organizations have done a lot to do is, provide things like support during pregnancy and lactation support when people return. In some of our research, just hearing those those crazy stories that you all are well familiar with of pumping in a hiding in a locker during 5 minutes of a break during lunch or whatever. So I think in terms of what people want from organizational environments, there's a lot of similarities, and yet there are some surprising places where there's still a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Jen. And you are correct. I cannot double down enough on men wanting the same things that women want, which is the opportunity to work fairly and being offered things that will help them do their job a lot better. So I'm gonna stay with you though, Jen, because I'm excited about this information and because operationally, it has helped me in my career extensively to know the data, to know the research. And although I have an idea when I've worked in the past, when I needed to do things like write a grant or perform a grant or advocate for the need, I needed data. So I'm gonna do a couple of questions with you. First, the people who are listening on this webinar are looking for resources, right? Where can they first go find the data that you've already created? Where can they find that? Then tell us what's next in the research on women in policing. And then what can the research offer to strengthen policing and public safety's organization? Almost, I don't know if that's like the example what I just shared, how it helped me advocate for my leaders, or commissioners, council members, tell the story. So often we don't tell our story and then we don't have time to go collect the data. But where can they first go get it that you've already done in RTI? Then what's next for women in policing and for the research? And then what can research offer to strengthen policing and public safety?
So in terms of where to find the research, there's a lot on our website at rti.org. And of course, I should have looked up the specific page of our policing workforce page. But I think if you Google policing workforce research RTI, it'll pop up. And we have our workforce research. It's separated into kind of our key topic areas. So in addition to some of the ones that I've mentioned, we also do research on technology and policing. So we have a lot of work at RTI on that. So we have a lot on our website. I mentioned that we work with our partner organizations and our agencies. So, everything that we have done in partnership with NOLI and 30 by 30 is usually pushed out through those newsletters, websites. For WIFL, we need to get a research partnership going. So you're next, Katrina. But yeah, so it's on any of our websites is where we curate a lot of those resources. The other thing is we've really emphasized practitioner-focused articles, like I mentioned, that are in the places where police leaders go for resources. So we do have some articles in Police Chief Magazine and Police One on some of the studies that I mentioned on officer stress and health, introducing some tools that we've created in the past, summarizing some of the academic articles that we've published in journals. I also encourage people to reach out to me if you have trouble finding anything or just want me to send you some of these links. But yeah, we've tried to make it really accessible for folks because, research can be difficult to digest. In terms of what's next, I'm really excited about where the field is headed. And I feel like research and research partnerships really hold a lot of power in helping us overcome some of the challenges that we're facing right now. I think, obviously there's a lot of differing views right now, not just about policing, but about, how to create the best society that we can, right, as a country. But I think that everyone wants to feel safe, right? This is something that we can come together around. And how to basically, create a stronger police workforce that does good policing and keeps communities safe is something that we can all come together around, right? So I think that we need bigger studies. I think part of the trouble is, a lot of these studies are smaller scale just because of how the funding works. I think we need longer studies, right? So that we can track people across time from when they enter the field, go through the academy, look at some, formative experiences and how that shapes people's work in the profession. And then, as I mentioned, we have a lot of great data now in terms of being able to understand better what makes good police officers in terms of the hiring criteria that we're looking at, the training that is used, and seeing how these things correlate with people's, experiences. But a lot of the studies that are done in a smallish number of sites. I mentioned that one we're doing with 30 by 30 that has 12, which is great. But, it's more like case studies. And so even if an agency does something that's really, rigorous and helpful for their own agency, it's still one site. And if we want to make generalizable recommendations that can help all agencies, we really need larger scale studies. So for those of you listening who have the funding, send it our way. But like I said, I'm really excited to, use the data available and these partnerships to hopefully help us come together to address these issues that we all care about what makes communities safe and what helps make a strong, healthy, and safe police workforce.
Thank you, Jen. So, Tanya, we're the leaders of our women supportive organization. NOLI, our vision is to have women inspired to enter in law enforcement, be empowered to be recognized and develop their own leadership potential and achieve their own unique goals. But how can organizations like WIFL, NOLI, the 30 by 30 initiative, RTI International continue to work together to drive lasting change for our profession? Tell me your opinion.
I think in this year especially, I've seen so much more collaboration and coordination between the organizations that are centered around women in policing. So our partnership with WIFL and with NOLI is so critical to ensure that we're all amplifying each other, working on the same issues, sharing solutions, and providing women officers and all officers with what they need in order to be successful in their careers, whether that's from, employee life cycle, recruitment, hiring, retention, to larger issues that are more cultural, for instance. And then when I think about entities like RTI, that research base is so important. 30 by 30 was built on evidence. It started 4 years ago today. Not today, sorry, this month. Started 4 years ago this month. And the key to it is really two things. It started with a deep dive into the understanding of the research around women in policing. Do women police differently? What does the academic research say about women's experiences, why they choose to promote, et cetera, and so on? We also spent a lot of time surveying and conducting focus groups with our agencies to understand the lived experiences with women officers. So we've talked with over 1,000 officers at this point, because it's important to have that research empirical base, but we also really need to understand that evidence base. For me, when, making change in policing is difficult, right? Some people have referred to it as moving granite. But when you have the evidence, when you have the research that informs the practice, and when you have leaders and organizations like Wiffle and Nolly that align with reform, I think that that's when we can really have support to implement the solutions that we need. And so I'm so looking forward to continuing to partner, share knowledge, and think about how we support and advance everyone in the profession, but especially for women that are interested in the profession, but also we want to make sure that they stay in the profession.
So Tanya, coming to you now. So 30 by 30 just released this week. Very exciting. The results of what you have done thus far. Can you first share a little bit about what you released in that book, in that report? Tell us where to go find it. And then share with us, how can organizations like Wiffle, Nolly, 30 by 30 Initiative, and RTI International continue to work together to drive lasting change in our profession?
Gina, thank you so much for that question. So exciting. This month marks our 4-year anniversary for 30 by 30. So we were thrilled to put out our first impact report that talks about a few things, the progress that we've made, talks about some of the misconceptions around what 30 by 30 is. And it also talks about our path forward. Just a note on where you can find it first. It's on our website, on our What Works page, and it's also on our LinkedIn page as well. And we're so looking forward to people taking a look at that and learning from it. So what have we seen? We are now in over 400 agencies across the United States and Canada. They range federal, local, state, sheriff. They range in size and they range in geography. They've made a lot of progress over the past 4 years. We've seen better policies around pregnancy, parental leave, and childcare options for police officers. We've seen agencies take a hard look at their data and think about their promotion process and how to make it more fair and equitable for everyone in the organization. We've seen a number of agencies take a hard look at mentoring and professional development. And of course, I have to shout out Nolly and Wiffle in terms of the mentoring that you offer women officers in that respect. And I think what's the best thing that we've seen is that we've seen a 28% increase in female recruits for agencies that joined early on and have completed their 2-year commitment. That is tremendous for when we think about where policing is in terms of the staffing challenges that we have right now. Anecdotally, we've also heard from a lot of men and women about the importance of this community of practice and how we all work together. And I think that's where our relationship with Nolly and with RTI and Wiffle becomes so important, because when we work together and we align closely on our missions, then we can amplify the work that we're all doing. One point that I'll make about 30 by 30 is, unfortunately, sometimes the work gets misconstrued. As proud as I am about that 28%, 30 by 30 is about improving policing, especially for women. We know policing is a really difficult job, but it should be no more difficult just because you're a woman. And so we're not about tokenism. We're not about preferential treatment. I think one of you made a point earlier that, a lot of the challenges that women face are the same as men in the profession. There are challenges in policing. So we tried to make that very clear in that report about what we are and what we aren't. In terms of looking forward and growth, we have a number of areas that we want to continue to dive into in thinking about pipelines. How do people get into this profession? How can we talk to more women that aren't even aware of the opportunities of careers in law enforcement? Taking a dive into some deeper issues that are below the surface in law enforcement. So thinking about sexual harassment, for instance, and how do we address those challenges in policing? So there's a number of things that we're looking forward to do in the next couple of years. And that partnership, the collaboration and coordination with NOLI and WIFL in particular, but having that research base behind it is going to be so important so that we can all continue to make an impact on this field.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you also, because as you were talking, I had questions coming up mine, but you answered them perfectly, especially about a lot of the misconceptions, right? That people assume or don't know or write off. So Katrina, I'm coming to you. Now, Katrina, let me share a little bit for our listening audience. I have never been in the federal field, federal profession as a law enforcement officer, but I've had many of women and men that I have encountered and know there are extremely different challenges. So my first question is going to be about your perception, a little bit personal. It's going to talk about the difference of, you can only talk about federal because I know there's already a challenge with work-life balance for us in local, right? Tell us, work-life balance is often cited as a challenge in law enforcement, right? How can agencies better support women balancing demanding careers with family life? And I know federal has another realm. And after you answer that one, I'm gonna come back to you with my second question.
What I love about our conversation is what we work towards for 30 by 30, NOLI, WIFL, as well as RTI, really transfers to all employees across the board, whether it's federal or local, state. And really, when we talk about work-life balance, when we talk about stress, mindfulness, resilience, how to handle, stressful situations that we all encounter in the profession, they're going to benefit everyone. Jen, you spoke so eloquently about that. For me, when I assumed this role with WIFL, it really was and is a priority for me because I also too, am married to now a retired federal law enforcement special agent. We have a teenage daughter that, I had probably, I think I had about 8 or 9 years left in my career as far as, when I was eligible to retire when we had her. And really just being able to have policies and procedures when, I decided that I was going to, start stop patrolling and get out of the police cruiser and out of the uniform and, have an administrative assignment because that's what my doctor had recommended that I do. Not shooting every month because the lead in the bullets, could be a safety hazard. Also to being able to have the appropriate amount of leave to go and take maternity leave and not feel guilty, and also to still be able to be the best mom for a newborn, but also to want to come back to work because I still have a career that I want to pursue as well. As well as when I get back to work, what will those flexible schedules be for not just me, but also my husband or my male and female counterparts to be able to drop off at daycare as early as possible and pick up as late as possible, get on the bus and off the bus, or to when they have the sick days and things like that, that they can't go to school, which one of us are going to be able to stay at home. So really being able to create those policies and procedures and really just kind of change the perception of what's always been is not necessarily always right. and just being able to change a culture and change and really hold leadership accountable, because they had the same challenges when they were moving up in their career too, and really just reminding executive leadership of the challenges that they had. So really knowing the challenges that my mom had as DC police, and having a daughter, and also needing those flexibilities in schedule as well. Also too, as I went through my career, I remember I took 17 weeks off, and I had to balance it between sick leave and annual leave. And, I came back with very, very minimal. And then I was up for promotion, because I went through the process and I was next on the list, and I did, my written test great. I did my interviews great. I got great evaluations. And when I was up for promotion, it was between me and others. And I was told I didn't have enough leave. I used too much leave, and it was because I just came back from maternity leave, and I wanted to obviously, bond with my daughter. So again, just recognizing that, there are many employees, especially women, that come to a crossroads throughout their career. And, really just being able to say that we can do and be everything, because we are all Wonder Woman. And just being able to say also too, and show that we can be the best in our profession, especially in law enforcement, and also be the best in our personal life in whatever role that we play, whether it is being a caregiver, whether it's being a volunteer or an entrepreneur, whether it's being a spouse or a parent. So I always watched through the career, and it always hurt me to the core of just seeing those individuals that came to that crossroad and gave a career up, because they didn't have policies and procedures that allowed them to continue in that profession. And their best option was to quit. And then also to pursue other opportunities, because there were other, agencies or there are other careers that actually allowed for that flexibility in schedule and to be able to balance both. So it really is a priority for me. I do feel that, federal government and federal law enforcement has done a lot better, whether it is paternity leave and maternity leave, flexibility in schedules. We talked about it, lactation rooms for when women come back to work, providing, the best equipment, the best uniforms, the best ballistic vests, the best guns, the best technology to allow us to perform our jobs safer. And more importantly, to allow us to be both, great professionals in the profession, in the law enforcement profession, but also too in whatever role that we play in our personal lives.
Katrina, your insights were so great and reminded me of something that I wanted to share about the work-life balance, and something we've seen in the research. So thank you for all of that. One thing I wanted to mention is, we've seen through the research in policing and outside of it, just the critical role that supervisors play in people's, experience of work-life balance, because, organizational policies and practices are absolutely key, that those be supportive and responsive to people's needs, but then people's individuals' experiences of those, right? Whether they're encouraged to use the resources available, or, all of the things that you describe, a lot of that hinges on the direct supervisor. And we know from policing and other professions, a lot of times people aren't trained that much on how to actually be a supervisor, right? Like in the operational aspects of the job, they're fantastic, but they just don't receive a lot of training and support. And a couple of years ago, I worked with some colleagues who had developed a training. It's called Family Supportive Supervisor Training, and they had implemented it in a variety of different occupations and settings, including the military. But what we did is we adapted it specifically for policing. So we did some focus groups and things to figure out how to adapt the training so that it would be relevant, in terms of the examples and the resources. But I love examples like this, because, you want solutions that are not super burdensome and are practical to apply. They conducted this police specific family supportive supervisor training to a bunch of frontline supervisors. So it was a lot of sergeants, lieutenants, professional staff supervisors, and it's just a couple of hours long. And these are my favorite things in research too, right? Like, it's not necessarily rocket science. So in this training, it's literally like training on these specific behaviors, and it's things like role modeling, like your own work-life balance, right? So if you're taking time away as a supervisor to go to your kid's event or whatever it is, being open about that and like sharing the ways that you problem solve. It's providing emotional support and instrumental support in terms of like making sure that you as a supervisor are familiar with the resources and support that your agency has, and that you're using them, and sharing that you're using them, encouraging people and whatever. And the coolest thing about something like this is that you actually, so the subordinates of the supervisors who took the training didn't engage with the program at all, right? Except to take a survey where we assess their attitudes about work-life balance, their supervisor, their experience of work. And just by having their supervisor go to this training, it's a couple hours long. And then we have the supervisors like set some simple goals for themselves of like, here's a couple simple behaviors that I just want to more regularly incorporate into my interactions with subordinates. Their employees show like improved job satisfaction, organizational commitment, being less likely to leave the job, improved relationships with their supervisors, like all of these really important metrics that we know are important for a healthy organization. And so I just wanted to plug the role of supervisors in employees' experiences of how those policies and procedures are experienced, but then just a plug for research, right? I think this is one of the cool things of sometimes there are relatively simple interventions that can have a really big impact, but you wouldn't know that without doing the research to evaluate the effects before and afterwards. So yeah, it just reminded me of those things that I wanted to share. And there are a lot of different examples of workforce research like that. So thanks for the reminder and everything you shared.
Oh, thank you.
And I would also add too, I'm sorry, Gina, but I'd also add too, having, taking the time to develop the policies, because the policies are what keep things consistent. And, again, it shouldn't be about, a supervisor liking an individual and being flexible with the schedules, but then you transfer assignments and now you don't have a supervisor because that supervisor is like, well, just because, I had to do it, in my career. But the policies standardize the practice, keep it fair, keep it consistent, especially from leadership, because we all know leadership ebbs and flows. And you may have a supportive leader, whether it's a director or a chief at some point. Now they've moved on, now they've retired. But again, those processes and those policies stay, and it continues to be fair, consistent, and applies to everybody, regardless of, gender, race, religion, and things like that. So, and it's equal. And I think that's the important thing as far as, to your point, Jen, the training, but also too, you need to take the time to develop those policies just to keep it consistent and fair.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Katrina. That's so crucial in regards to people don't want to really do the work of creating policy, right? There's so many templates that can be used, but that policy point is really, like you just said, an instruction manual. I don't know what to do. Let me pull out an instruction manual, right? Especially for new supervisors who don't know what they don't know. We can have a ton of examples, and I think that's why the powerful of this panel and our organizations, even I can talk about my own personal experience with work-life balance. I had to have a good family extension network, but I still did not even promote until I was 10 years on, because I've been in this 37 years. I have a 34-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old daughter. My 34-year-old daughter was a C-section baby. I had her 2.5 years on. I had no time and no leave. So I came back from a C-section after 4 weeks. 4 weeks, right? Coming back. But I also nursed her for 3 months. What I could do with her was totally different than what I did to myself, and it impacted myself personally. But fast forward 10 years later, I had my youngest, where she was not a C-section, but I was off even for 12 weeks plus. And then I was able to take the time coming back using my time that I had. But having that knowledge even then, and for individuals, women in law enforcement, the reality of them being afraid to even ask, right? Even afraid to ask for help is a real thing. And they don't want to ask, because who will they ask? How do I nurse? I did it in a bathroom stall. How nasty is that? But my youngest, I nursed her for a year. There's a totally difference, right? What the plan is. So being able to have supervisors well aware of how do you help and empathize with your workforce, because it has to also be open to men to understand, to take paternity leave, to say, this is something that my family needs and we care about the situation. And when you have a supervisor knowing that you care and will listen, it makes a big difference. So Tanya, did you have anything?
Yeah, Gina, something you just said, I think we really need to get more men involved in this work. We need men to support the rights of women in the workplace. There's 18,000 law enforcement agencies, and I've worked with so many. And to the story you mentioned earlier about the woman that's 8 months pregnant and doesn't understand like I see that over and over again about the lack of awareness about what people have access to on both sides. The woman that's experiencing it or the man in terms of, parental leave, as well as the supervisors. And that's why I'm, super glad to report that we're working on a pregnancy and parental leave guide in concert with Nolly and Wiffle, and we'll be pushing that out later this year. So really good that we're going to be able to shed some light on that information. I struggle with the idea of balance. Sometimes I don't think that it really exists. For me personally, having been in law enforcement and my husband being on the job, we made a decision not to have a second child because of our careers. And that was a really tough decision. And I know others that have made even more difficult decisions in that space. So I think it's a call to action for people in policing to make sure that they really understand what these issues are and how they affect their workforce. Because Jen, as an IO psychologist, certainly knows, these are issues that affect everyone in policing, and we have to do better for the folks that work there, or we're going to continue to have the same challenges with staffing, as well as with officer safety and wellness and the concerns that we have in that space.
Thank you, Tanya. And I'm going to remind Jen, that research that you shared is very important. It's crucial. We would love to see it. Go to your website, talking about that training that's offered. Very good. Katrina, coming back to you. So you've been doing this for decades. So have I. As a leader, we have been required to actually know different generational attitudes, differences, and things like that in order to do that. So, but tell me your opinion. Or your message? Tell me your message. What message do you have for women who are currently serving in law enforcement and who are carrying on the torch for the next generation?
Yeah, that's a loaded question and a great question. As I reflect on my career, when I was deputy chief at the White House, it was my first senior leadership as far as deputy chief position. And I just went in as the first, as I mentioned earlier, the first female or woman deputy chief in the history of our uniform division. And I think we all can say we watched leaders before and how they've led it, in various positions, and not saying that they did right or wrong. I think we just looked at the situations and just said, if I were in that role coming up in a career, how would I do things different? And so I used those opportunities as I went into that position to just provide a different perspective, a different lens, really being able to promote, again, with my mindset of, the challenges that I have had to go through, with being a mom, being a spouse of another federal law enforcement employee, just being able to say, you can be your best at home. And when you're your best at home, you also are your best at work. And then recognizing that when you are your best at work, or even when you have a bad day, that really kind of transitions into your home life, because you're short with your children when you respond to them. You shut down when you go home, and you don't really want to talk or have conversations because your mind is just continued. You've got so much information in your mind. But again, I think just for me, just being able to lead in that position and just provide perspective, which hopefully was viewed for the next generations to come. We all recognize and we know the challenge coin mindset in law enforcement, similar to the military. And so I had on the back of my challenge coin a Winston Churchill quote. And that quote is, to each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they're figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing, something unique to them and fitted to their talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. And when I read that quote early in my career, it really resonated with me because, this profession is of public service. It is a commitment. We make sacrifices, but it also, for just women in the profession, we want our positions because we deserve them. anytime we get positions, the naysayers who are saying, you got this position because you're a woman and things like that. And we really put that burden on ourselves most of the time to sit there and make sure that we're overqualified. We put in for every position and we, but also too, we're going back to school to get these educational, degrees. It's what I did. We're putting in for anything and everything. We're traveling the world. We're, always at work, staying late hours. But again, just being able to set the tone of, we all are going to have our finest hour, and to make sure that we are prepared and qualified for whatever role that we're given, so we can look at ourselves in the mirror, we can stand proud and shoulders back to say, I got this position because I deserved it. So that's really a message that I'd like to share with, all of the new generation that are really the new legacy makers. When we had our 25th anniversary law enforcement WIFL leadership training last year, it was an incredible opportunity. We had a panel of all the first. The first FBI, Susan Rowley Malone, reached out to Joanne Misko, the first 2 FBI agents back in 1972. The 5 female Secret Service agents, Catherine Clark, Phyllis Shantz, Sue Ann Baker, Joanne Kocher, the first ATF, Janine Gordon, the first postal inspection, and we invited them to our leadership training to sit on the panel just to talk about how the profession has changed, the challenges that they had as the first women who walked in the door. For me, each conversation that I had to invite them, I actually welled up in tears, because it was just like, oh my goodness, as I looked at my mom and just the challenges and sacrifices that she had, these are the true legacy makers. And so reminding ourselves, they're the women that open the door for all of us. Now we, as the new generation, need to hold that door open and pull the new generation of women through. And again, it's through mentorship, it's through networking, it's through our organizations of NOLI, as well as 30 by 30 RTI, just to sit there and be able to be those change makers and really set the tone for the newest generation. So again, the power of mentorship, being able to stand up and stand strong, knowing that you got your positions because you deserve them, but more importantly, holding that door open for the newest generation to just be their own firsts, because there are many that are in this audience listening right now. You will be the first in any position, in many positions, whether it's in law enforcement or roles of leadership throughout various state, local departments, as well as federal law enforcement agencies. So it's awesome, because again, we are that's what we've worked hard towards our career, to be that, and to set the tone for others.
Thank you, Katrina. And even as you were telling the story of your last conference, and just that, knowing the opportunities we personally have had to encounter history makers, right? Knowing the work that they did helped us get to where we are, and knowing the work that we're doing now is helping catapult the future. And we'll be at one point be able to say, oh, I know her, and just amazing. And so proud of the good work that we're doing across the world, right, as women in this profession. We can talk forever and give examples of different stories, be amazed, be inspired forever. But for this webinar, we're going to have to bring it to a close. So with the close, I'm going to ask one question for us all to just give a little bit of words to our viewers. So I'm going to start with you, Jen. The question is, what will be your last message to the women who are watching in our profession in honor of Women's History Month? Just what words do you want to give to the women for Women's History Month?
Well, as the one, I guess, outsider here, right, not actually in the law enforcement profession, I just want to say thank you. And wow, I am consistently just blown away by the resilience and the positivity. I'll give one more quick example. So we did a study on recruiting women into policing, and the focus was really on the barriers that women had faced and how to remove those barriers. And so we were trying to, going into it thinking, what are we going to learn about what was difficult and the challenges and all these things? What stuck with me the most was the positivity and the passion, and that women love this job and they're so good at it. And it's inspiring to me as someone outside the profession. It gives me hope for public safety. We talked to students, I mentioned earlier, about what would get you interested in law enforcement career, what would change your perception. And people say, well, we don't see a lot of positive examples of how policing is changing. We see all the negative stuff, right? In the media, all of the things that are troubling and would keep us away. If there are positive examples out there, we need to see them. They're here with you all in your organizations. Every time I encounter a woman in law enforcement, one of these conferences, connections that I've made through you all, I hear these amazing examples, and I feel like it's the hope of the profession. It get people excited about entering the profession. It gets me excited. So just thank you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for the hope that you give us for the profession and for public safety.
Thank you, Jen. And I'm gonna give you a little news flash. You are part of our profession. If you're helping educate criminal justice field, just like our professors that help us get our degrees, they are part of our profession, creating who we are. So you are part of us, and thank you for that message.
Thank you,
Tanya,
Jeannie.
question to you. What will be your last message for Women's History Month?
It's so hard to have just one. I echo Jen in saying thank you. Thank you for the work that everyone does in this space, whether you're sworn professional staff on the research side. It's a really difficult job, and thank you for everything you do. Also, like Katrina, I love quotes. So one of my favorite ones is well-behaved women seldom make history. And what I will say about that is women belong in policing. Women belong everywhere. So keep it up. Keep pushing forward, keep supporting each other, keep leading the way, because the work that all of us are doing and all of the work that we see in the agencies and the individual officers, it matters. It makes policing better, and every challenge that someone has to overcome helps someone else in dealing with that in the future. So thank you, and continue to do what you're doing every day. And lastly, know that you have the support of these organizations and of so many other folks, men and women, in the field of policing and beyond.
Thank you, Tanya. And I'm going to reiterate, there is no work-life balance. It depends on the individual. That is male and female. You can look across the spectrum and see the time but it is a effort that we all have to take care of ourselves. That's the biggest thing. The work-life balance has to take care of yourself so you can take care of others. I love what I do. It'll probably always be off balance, but the important time periods, I make sure I'm there. Now, Katrina, before I get to mine, you tell me, what last message do you want to give to women for Women's History Month?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I find that, one, thank you. What has been great about today is that, while some of our organizations historically have been siloed, we are coming together. And, this audience and those that are in the profession provide us meaning and provide us purpose, knowing that the work that we are doing has such a great impact. What I would say is, don't let the profession define you. Don't conform to a culture just because you define the profession. Challenge the status quo. Ask why, ask questions, come with good perspective and with unique ideas, because you probably see things that even we didn't see throughout our profession, that you can really just work to make this better. And while there's going to be sacrifices and there's going to be hurdles, there's a way to walk around those hurdles, jump over those hurdles, and sometimes you have to barge through those hurdles. But together, we're going to do this collectively, and we're going to do it with meaningful impact just for the betterment of the profession.
Thank you, Tanya. Katrina, that was awesome. So we're coming to a close, and what the one message that I would have: one, you've listened to the panel of amazing, big freaking deal women share not only their experience, but their receipts. And what I mean by receipts is the evidence of the work that has already been done. You too, this is my message to the women in law enforcement. You too have made history. You too are making history. You too can downplay the negative things. Just look at your history of yourself and the others around you. So I'm gonna do one little quote, simple quote, because I can be all over the board and I have messages. Words are very important to yourself, first of all, for the listeners. Even when you tell yourself or repeat to things that you won't or can't, take those things out of your mind, you can. So here's my quote from Coco Chanel. Coco Chanel said, a girl should be two things: who and what she wants. So truly, whatever you want, you can do it. Look at history. And thank you for joining us on this webinar. Thank you, panel members. It's been exciting. Like I said, we could have been here for days, but I appreciate your time, and I'm super excited about us being stronger together for the future of women in law enforcement.
Thank you for joining us for Women's History Month, Advancing Representation in Law Enforcement. I'd like to especially thank our panel for their enlightening discussion and to Chief Gina Davis and Nolly for their efforts in spearheading this conversation. I would also like to extend a special thank you to Target for sponsoring tonight's program. The National Law Enforcement Museum is committed to telling the stories of American law enforcement. With your support, we make programs like this happen, and we appreciate that you took the time to join us for tonight's program. If you ever find yourself in Washington, D.C., we hope that you will pay us a visit at 444 East Street Northwest. Until we meet again, stay safe.